Well, good morning. You go and grab a seat, grab a seat, grab a seat. My name is Ryan. I'm the lead pastor here at Element. It's a pleasure just to be able to welcome you to our church. If it's your first time or if you've been here a long time, you just had to move a clipboard to be able to sit down. I'm going to ask that you take that clipboard. On it is what we call our connection card. There's a place on there for you to take some notes, gives you a little bit of information about who we are, but there's a thing at the bottom that's perforated. You can tear that off now or later. But what we ask from everybody every week is that they'd fill that out with as much information as you feel comfortable giving us. We promise not to spam you or drive you crazy or, as some churches used to do, bring a loaf of bread to the house. We're not going to do that today. But what we do want to do is just reach out to you, be able to pray for you, to be able to encourage you, to thank you for coming. If you're a first-timer, the one thing that we ask is that you don't turn it in. Everybody who's been here before knows that there's a guy that'll be standing in the back with a popcorn bucket. You can just drop it in there on your way out. But if you're a first-time guest, we have a special gift for you. It's just a T-shirt to say thank you so much for joining us. We know there's a lot you could do on a Sunday morning. We know there's a lot of things that we compete with, and it's not really other churches that are out there. We're competing with the golf course and with sleeping in and with catching up on Netflix or just relaxing in whatever way you prefer. And we appreciate you giving God and giving Element a chance this morning. And so if we can give you a free gift to just say thank you, we would greatly appreciate being able to do that. But we appreciate you being here this morning. You're joining us in the middle of a series called Courageous, which is all about addressing fear and embracing opportunity. And we kicked it off last week. We're going to be continuing it through next week, and then we got a new series after that. But I want to catch you up a little bit if you missed last week. So the idea of the series, we're studying the life of Joshua. He's this guy in the Bible thousands of years ago who at different times had moments of courage where he moved and God showed up and God moved on his behalf and did some amazing things. And we can look at him as this amazing man of faith, or we can see him who I believe he actually was, which was a man who trusted God enough to follow him. And last week we talked about this idea, are you willing to trust God when you don't know all the details? And see, the way this all starts with Joshua is this. Moses is his leader, and we've all heard of Moses. Moses is the leader of all the Israelites. Moses took on Pharaoh and won. Moses has called down the 10 plagues, and they've come. Moses has led the people out of Egypt. Everything is going well. And then Joshua 1 opens with a verse that says, Moses, my servant, is dead. This is God talking to Joshua. Moses is dead. You're now the leader. Go. Go where? Well, get the people ready. You're going to lead them across the river tomorrow into the promised land that I've given you. And it's well, God, what about finding Moses and making sure there's a proper burial and all that? No. Moses is dead. You're the leader. Get ready. Go. And we talked about last week, for me, I'm a head person. That bothers me. I have all kinds of fear. I'm worried about what's coming up. I'm worried about how do I even convince people that we had this conversation? Because, I'm out here by myself right now, God. How do I tell the people that I'm the leader and they should trust me and we're going to go tomorrow? And that Moses is dead, but we're not going to follow any of the rituals on burying him. We're just going to, leave him and assume that you took care of him somehow. And God's don't worry about it. Just go. And what we saw last week was this, and this was kind of the three big things from last week. It was a challenge to trust God's presence. Because there are moments in life where we'll hear from God, and there are moments in life where we won't. There's moments for Joshua where he hears directly from God exactly what he's supposed to do. And those moments when God has spoken to me have been amazing. Because it's unrivaled clarity. But then there's moments where it's just silence. And we talked about it last week. I've talked about this before, but the 430 years between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of Jesus coming was just complete silence from God. So there are definite moments of silence. If you don't feel like you're hearing from God, it's not because they're necessarily broken. It may mean because God is silent. In any case, when God is silent, we have to trust his presence. The second thing we have to do is study his word, and then the last thing we do is do what he says. So we don't just read it, we do what it says. And then we asked this question last week, and we kind of came up with an answer that we're going with, and this is kind of the theme of this series. It's an act of courage, but it's how do we trust his presence? What does it mean to trust his presence? And here's the question we answer that with. It's what would you do if you were 100% confident that God was with you? And you can ask that question of yourself this morning. There's situations you walk in here with that you know need to be addressed. Maybe it's a tough conversation. Maybe it's a job change. Maybe it's asking her out. Maybe it's something completely different. And you go, I need to do it. And if I knew God was with me, I would. Well, here's how you trust his presence. Do it. What would you do if you were 100% confident that God was with you? Do that and trust that he'll be with you. And so that's the challenge that we have. That's the act of courage we're challenged to. What would you do if you were 100% confident God was with you? Now, last week was all about what do you do when you don't have all the details? And for some of us, that just freaks us out and paralyzes us. And I talked about it last week, that what I do when I don't have all the details is I play out all the scenarios I can come up with on how a conversation is going to happen. And one of you guys came up to me last week and they said, well, that's just like planning. That's just thinking ahead. That's just being prepared for however somebody's going to argue back against what you say, and now you're ready to go. And I said, yeah, but the problem is this. The problem is I never wind up having the real conversation. I have so many conversations in my head about how it could turn out, and enough of them turn out poorly that I just go, I'll just give in to fear. And I'll just let the opportunity go, and I never have the real conversation. And I run from it, and I miss out on what God has for me. Here's the thing I want you to get in this series. If you don't pay attention to anything else I say this morning, last week, or next week, don't miss this. If you don't take a step of courage, you will miss out on what God has for you. And you go, but God is sovereign, and God can do things outside of me. Absolutely, God can. But what we see all throughout Scripture is that God not only works on our behalf and outside of what we do, but God calls us to something. And if we refuse to take that step, it does affect how we live this life. And so we have a challenge this morning. Will you choose to be courageous? And here's this morning. Last week was, what do you do when you don't have all the details? This week is, what do you do when you have all the details and they just don't make any sense? You ever been there? Like, I know how this is going to play out. I've been here before. I feel like I'm going to be here again. I know how this situation works. And regardless of what you're trying to tell me, it just doesn't make any sense. I'm tired of trusting that somehow it's going to be different this time. If we fast forward in the life of Joshua, here's what you get. He says they're now in the promised land. They're going around. There's a city called Jericho, pretty big city. And it says, now the gates of Jericho were tightly shut because the people were afraid of the Israelites. No one was allowed to go out or in. Basically, God had said, this land is yours. It's not theirs. You're going to overtake them. And so they see the city is all shut up. They see that like the people are afraid of them. No one's allowed to go out or in. But the Lord said to Joshua, I have given you Jericho, its king, and all its strong warriors. You and your fighting men should march around the town once a day for 6 days. Wait a minute before you go forward on the slide back there. This right here is where he's about to give the battle plan. So I want you to think as somebody who's part of the army. Maybe you view yourself as a leader. Think about this from the perspective of Joshua. God is about to give me the battle plan on how we're going to take this place over. Here it comes. He says, you and your fighting men should march around the town once a day for 6 days. Okay, God, are we going to do some scouting? What do you want me doing? Maybe he's going to tell us in the next verse. Check this out. 7 priests, well, they're not really fighters, but we can bring them, I guess. 7 priests are going to walk ahead of the ark. Now, the ark is the Ark of the Covenant. If you don't know about this reference, it's okay. Basically, the way it worked before Jesus was that the Israelites had this box. It was called the Ark of the Covenant, and it represented the presence of God. And so, basically, what God's telling them is, you take the 7 priests who are going to walk ahead of the Ark of the Covenant, each carrying a ram's horn. And on the 7th day, you're going to march around the town 7 times with the priests blowing their horns. And when you hear the priest give one long blast on the ram's horn, have all the people shout as loud as they can. And then the walls of the town are going to collapse and the people can charge straight into the town. Go tell your people that, Joshua. Can you imagine what it would have been like for Joshua in that moment? All right, guys, get everybody together. I got to talk to all of our army. I need to talk to them. And he stands up and he addresses them and they fill the seats and they're all in cadence and they know exactly what they're supposed to do and they're ready for their marching orders. And Joshua says, all right, guys, here's the plan. We're going to march around the city tomorrow. Okay? And then we're going to come back to camp and go to sleep. And here's kind of the way this is going to work. We're going to take the priests and we're going to put them out front. But we need some people to protect them and just walk with them. So we're going to put all of our warriors kind of around them, and we're going to just march around this city. We're gonna carry God around this city, and we're gonna march all the way around it. So make sure you got on some comfy sandals tomorrow, because we're doing a little bit of a hike, all right? And we're gonna do this thing. Are we supposed to be scouting or anything? I mean, you can look, but if you go back and read Joshua 6, you'll see he says this to them. Don't even say a word. Just march and allow the ram's horn to be the only thing that makes noise. All right, Joshua, got it. And then day 2, we attack. No. Day 2, we're going to get up in the morning. We're going to put some priests out there, and they're going to carry the ark, and we're going to march, and we're going to protect them, and we're going to march all the way around the city, and you're going to be quiet, and they're going to blow the horn. And then what? And then we're going to come back to camp and go to sleep. Okay, got it. What about day 3? Well, we're going to do the same exact thing. And day 4, and day 5, and day 6. That's what we're going to do. Okay, got it. And then day 7 is the day when we're going to attack. We've scouted this city. We've weakened their walls. We've taken the insults from the people on top of the wall yelling at us. We are ready. Yeah. So what's our plan of attack? Like, I've been working on a catapult. I got some other things going. We're ready to take down these walls so we can go attack these people. We got it. We got flaming arrows ready to shoot. No. Here's the plan for day 7. Day 7, we're going to take some priests. I swear if you keep bringing up these priests. I mean, I'm just being real. Like, I would be like, this is the stupidest thing ever. I'd be like, I'm sick day 1 through 6. I don't want to be part of this. That's just a bunch of marching. And then you get to hear what day 7's plan is. And day 7's plan is we're going to take the same priests, and we're going to take the same warriors, and we're going to march around the city 7 times. Why not wear us out before we have to go fight battles? And you're going to march around the city 7 times. You're not going to make any noise. The priests are going to blow the horn. And then at the end of that, they're going to do this one long blast. You'll know it's coming. I'll signal you. They're going to do one long blast, and then we go attack? No, then we all shout. And the walls are going to fall down. Not saying you're overlooking something here, Joshua, but how are the walls going to fall down? I don't know. God promised he would move if we would trust him. So you're telling me my battle plan doesn't even require a sword and a shield. Well, you might want to bring a shield because they can throw things at you from the top of the wall. But you're not going to be attacking. Not until day 7 after God moves. And then when God moves and the walls collapse, then we go overtake this city in his name, for his glory. And we can't even take any credit for it. In the meantime, get some rest and get ready to march tomorrow. Can you imagine? Like those details don't make any sense. God has spoken clearly, and it's still confusing. And Joshua has this moment. Am I going to trust him, or am I going to do it my way? And here's the thing that we all get. We all understand this about Joshua. Now, we don't necessarily understand this because we get the rest of Joshua 6. You can go read it. You can know what happens. If you're a Bible person in the room, you already know the end of the story. We're not even going to go there this morning because this morning isn't about taking over Jericho. This morning is about will you trust God when you don't know the results. See, here's what we know. Joshua had no guarantee. No guarantee that the situation would work out the way that he thought it would. Or the way that he hoped it would. Isn't that true in our lives? Isn't that what makes courage so hard? We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how it's going to turn out. If we knew the outcome, it really wouldn't even take courage. Joshua had no guarantee. God had said it. But Joshua was the one putting his men's lives at risk. He has no guarantee that it's going to turn out the way he hoped it would. And then this is also true about Joshua. Joshua had no idea what hung in the balance of his decision to be courageous. He had no idea what hung in the balance of his decision to be courageous. See, here's what's true for everybody today. And you can think about this. I'm going to give you some examples to help it relate, but a single act of courage is often the catalyst for extraordinary. A single act of courage is often the catalyst for the extraordinary. Are you willing to take a step of courage when you don't know the results, and you also realize you don't know what hangs in the balance? Rosa Parks decided to remain seated on a bus. She didn't know that it was going to change the way that we have race relations in our country 50 years later. And some of you go, the system's still broken. I agree, but it is better. And she had no idea in a moment. She said, I'm not moving. I'm going to stand up for what I believe in, whether it works out in my favor or not. That single act of courage, she had no idea what hung in the balance. Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, Martin Luther, if you don't know, nailed 95 theses to the door of the Catholic Church. It was his problems with the way that they operated in faith, and it's changed the way that we experience faith forever. The fact that you're here right now, able to experience faith in this way, and I'm not a priest, and I'm not wearing a collar, and we don't do things every way that the Catholic Church does them, is a result of what Martin Luther did in one moment, in one act of courage, to help make a difference to reform the church that he loved. He wasn't even oppositional, but he knew it needed help. And he had one act of courage that led to the extraordinary. Joshua. I think there's multiple moments in Joshua's life that we could lead to, but Joshua is told by God, Moses, my servant, is dead. You're now leading the people. Take him across the Jordan, and he did. I don't think he had any idea what hung in the balance. I don't think he knew that the walls of Jericho would fall and that God would move and there would be miracles. But a single act of courage was the catalyst for the extraordinary. So let me ask you, what area of life do you need to take a single act of courage? There are some of you who walked in and life's not that stressful today. And that's great. Enjoy that. But there are some of you who walked in heavy-hearted, with a lot on your mind, knowing that there's some things that if you don't resolve them, they'll never be resolved. If you don't address them, they'll never be addressed. And it may be a single act of courage that you need to take that will lead to the extraordinary. But here's what's true for you. You have no guarantee that your situation will work out the way you hope it does. Just before you start accusing me, Pastor, you're telling me everything's going to work out, and when my situation doesn't, I'm going to blame you. I'm not telling you that. I have no idea how your situation is going to work out. You may eat healthier, exercise more, and still get cancer. Well, that's morbid, but it's real. You may ask her out, do everything you can, and she has an affair and leaves you. I have no guarantees for how situations will work out in your life. We don't get that. We don't get that guarantee. What we get is a calling from God to be a man of character or a woman of character, to trust him, to take a step of courage when he calls us to. But we have no guarantee that our situation is going to work out the way that we hope it does. But here's the other thing that's true. You have no idea what hangs in the balance of your decision to be courageous. And so this morning, what I want to lean into are 4 different areas, and I took them from somebody. I'll give him the credit. Andy Stanley preached at a conference a couple years ago that I was at, and he talked about 4 areas where we need to have courage. And as I prepared for this message, I knew I'd be communicating truth, and I was going to communicate the story of Joshua, but I wanted to make sure that it was relevant. And this is the thing that has just played over and over and over in my mind over the past couple years and over the past couple days as I prepped for this. So I want to share with you 4 areas where we need the courage. The first one is we need the courage to stay when it would be easier to leave. Some of you in this room need the courage to stay when it would be easier to leave. Maybe it's a job, and you don't feel like you're making a difference, and it doesn't feel like it's going the way that you thought it should. You've got no idea what hangs in the balance of your decision to stay. And you go, but you don't know my boss. I don't. But you have no idea what God may be doing. Some of you are ready to walk out on a marriage, to walk away from a relationship that you committed your life to. And you go, you don't understand how bad it is. Maybe not. I've been there, though. You have no idea what hangs in the balance of your decision to stay when it would be easier to leave. Man, there's times in life when everything just makes sense to go, to run. But here's what I know, that if you make the decision to run today, you're going to make the decision to run tomorrow. And it very well could be the defining moment of your life. Not in a great way. Which leads us into the second one, which is going to sound a little bit contradictory, but it's not. You need to have the courage to leave when it would be easier to stay. This is situational, right? This isn't every situation all of these apply, but there's times when people are sitting here going, I know it would be easier for me to stay. It'd be easier to stay with the comfortable job. It'd be easier to take the paycheck. I think of the story of Dan Patrick. Somebody in here is like, Dan Patrick from like Sports Center? Yeah, Dan Patrick from Sports Center. If you don't know, Dan Patrick was at the height of his career with Sports Center. He was an analyst. He had the big show with KO and Dan. They were funny. They were great. I watched it every single sick day. I watched like 10 hours of Sports Center. It was the same episode repeated, but I loved it. All the time. Would just sit and watch it. Love Dan Patrick. He had a sports talk show on ESPN. He stuck with it. He did great. ESPN is, or at least was, the height of cable sports programming. And he was at the height of that. Some things went down. Some situations had changed. He had some disagreements with management. It would have been very easy for him to stay. He was getting well paid. He had all kinds of fame. And he made a decision to leave. To go start his own sports talk show. To try and get some radio stations to pick him up. The show's now 10 years old. It's real easy to tell the story of this when it's 10 years old, but the day they left and they started, him and 3 other guys were in his attic at his house. Running wires, running soundboards, our production team can relate, trying to create a space where he could do a show. And I remember Paulie, one of his executive producers, Paulie said, when we were on ESPN and I did executive producing for you, the moment we would open the phone lines, it was like 25 deep. He goes, day one of the DP show, when we opened the phone lines, it was silent. And then he said, the first call we ever got was a call from a guy who said, oh, it's the wrong number. Sorry. And hung up. And he's like, well, we can put you on the air. You can just talk to Dan. No, I'm good. See ya. It was to the point they said we were wondering if we should have had some interns start calling in. And by interns, we mean us. Because there was only 4 of us, and we just needed people to be able to talk to Dan. See, in that moment, it would have been easier for them to stay. What's been created, in my opinion, is by far the best sports talk show that's out there. That speaks to culture, that speaks to sports, that speaks to different things. It's not biblical. I'm not trying to promote Dan Patrick as you're hearing from God if you listen to his show. You're not. All right? You just get a great sports talk show. But what I'm pointing out is there's moments in life when it would be easier to stay and we need to make the decision to leave. See, in the church context, there was a group of people 4 years ago who said it would be easier to stay at the church we're at. We know where the kids' ministry is. We know how to function. We walk in every Sunday. We can show up 5 minutes before service or 5 minutes after service, and we don't have to really do much. But we believe that God could be doing something great. That God could be reaching an area that we don't even know much about. And we're willing to pick up our family and move to Laurel. We're willing to drive further to church. We're willing to reach people. We're willing to get up early and set up things and give to something that doesn't even have a building or a name yet. And I'm convinced of this because I'm one of those people. But I'll talk for them. I'm convinced of this, that if you ask those people, would it have been easier to stay? Sure. Are you glad you left? Absolutely. That's not because of where we came from. It's because since we left, 15 different people have met Jesus that wouldn't have met Jesus otherwise. that have been baptized that have said, I want to go public and I want people to know that I'm aligning myself with Christ. There's men and there's women that I could just start pointing out that have interacted with the God of the universe where they wouldn't even step into the church before. Because a group of people decided to leave when it would have been easier to stay. For some of us, that's the act of courage we need to take. For others, maybe our act of courage is this. We need to get help when it would be easier to pretend. I feel like I get this as a parent. I definitely get this as a leader. There's moments where I want to just, I mean, it's not moments, this is my life. I just want people to think I have it all together. As Noah grows up, I want him to think, I know everything. I've got it all worked out. I'm well disciplined, even though I'm not. There's moments in my life when I have secrets that are eating me from the inside out. And I need to have the courage to get help, but it's easier to pretend that I just don't have a problem. See, but here's the problem as leaders, and here's the problem as people. In the moments when it's easier to pretend and to not get help, and we need the courage to get help, in those moments, that becomes the limp that affects our leadership. What you're hiding winds up killing you from the inside out, because this is what's true. What you fear privately, you will overcompensate for publicly. What you fear privately, parents, bosses, individuals, employees, student, what you fear privately, you will overcompensate for publicly. And so in those moments, when we have a secret, we have to have the courage to get help when it would be easier to pretend. Look, I'll be real. We got to be far more scared of the consequences of concealment than we do the consequences of confession. I'll be honest with you about something at Element. You ever come to me and confess sin? We'll have a conversation. We'll work towards restoration. That's biblical. If I have to catch you in a sin, it will be a problem. Not because I'm judgmental, but because as a church we understand there is a difference between confessing something and being caught doing something. I have a friend who's married, 4 kids. His marriage and his life and his job are completely falling apart. You could look up his story online if I told you his name, because he was arrested recently. He's going to be serving a lot of time in jail if he gets convicted. And when I talk to somebody who's very close to them, all that his wife said is, we know he's been lying for a long time. We don't know all the details. I don't know if it's all true or if it's not. But we know he's been concealing some things. And now that it's all coming out, it's a much bigger deal than what he ever wanted it to be. See, we have to, as people, we have to come to a conclusion that we're more scared of concealing our sin and our issues and our struggles than we are of confessing our sin and our issues and our struggles. If we confess it, we get help. Talk to anybody who's ever been to AA or NA or through any addiction program. The first step is admitting that you have a problem. But when you come to that point, you're in a place where you can begin healing. But for some reason, we walk into a church and we expect that if we confess sin, we're just going to be shunned and kicked back out. Not here. That group of people that left where we were committed to create an environment where grace reigned. And yeah, we're still going to do it with truth, and we're going to call you to a better life, because if we're a church that's just all grace, we never call you to anything better. But at the end of the day, we're committed to, if you're willing to confess, if you're willing to address the struggles you have, we want to help you move forward. We need the courage to stay when it would be easier to leave when it would be easier to stay, to get help when it would be easier to pretend, and lastly, we need the courage to submit when it would be easier to power up? You mean I'm supposed to listen to my kid when they call me out and I know they're right, but I don't want to listen to them? You mean I'm supposed to listen to my employee? I'm supposed to act like what they're saying is right even though it's telling me that I'm wrong? You mean I'm supposed to listen? I was the one put in charge of this project, not you. I'm going to pound my fist and I'm going to puff out my chest and I'm going to make sure you know that I'm the leader and I have the final call. In those moments, when all we want to do is power up and flex our muscles, we need to have the courage to submit. And it's tough. But I'll be honest, as a leader, this is something I deal with on a daily basis because what's true about me, I believe is true about you. You're not the smartest person in the room. If you're a leader, I hope for your job, you're not the smartest person in the room. You're just the one called to be the leader. We sit around a table on a regular basis at my house and have meetings, and I'm definitely not the smartest person in the room in most of those conversations. The only one is when it's just me and Noah. I think I can beat him a little bit in that. He's one. Give him a couple years, he'll pass me. But in any case, I'm not the smartest person in the room, and I'm happy with that. The question is, and the challenge is, when you recognize you're not the smartest person in the room, are you willing to submit? Are you willing to listen? Are you willing to hear and apply the truth that's there? So I want to close with two questions, or really a question and a statement to kind of wrap this thing up. Here's the question. When the details don't make sense, will you have the courage to trust God anyway? I can't answer it for you. Here's what I can say as a leader. As a leader, I've rarely regretted the risk that I took. I always regret the opportunities that I missed. It's just, that's not just as a leader, that's as a spouse, that's as a father. As I look back, as I deal with life, I don't regret the risk that I took because I can always kind of just write it off like, well, it didn't work out, but I'm glad I did it. Because more times than not, God moved in a way, even though I wasn't, maybe it's not the way I hoped it would turn out, but it turned out better than I thought it could have. Because God moved, God did something, people came around it, it turned out better. I'm not really ever upset about the risk that I took as I look back. But even today at 33, there's a lot of opportunities that I regret not taking. The risk that I didn't take, and the opportunity that was missed. And the only difference between taking a risk and seeing if God moves and just going with what you know is courage. Will you address your fear? Will you embrace the opportunity? Or will you just let another opportunity pass you by because you don't want to take a step of courage? See, I think we should fear something. I know it's a courageous series, and I'm saying don't have fear and overcome your fear, but I really do think we should fear something. I think what we should fear is this. Looking back and wondering what might have been if we would have trusted God and obeyed what He said. I don't want to be a person that does that. I don't want to lead a church of people that do that. Look, I'll be real. There's a lot of people that I've been able to sit down with who are older. At times I've been able to sit with people on their deathbed. You know what the worst thing is, the most disheartening thing is? It's to look in somebody's eyes and see regret of opportunities missed. Nobody's talking about how much money they made or more time they would have spent at work or whatever it is. It's a lot of times the opportunities they feel like they missed. And there's always seems to be a challenge from people to be courageous because the thing we should actually fear is looking back and wondering what would have happened if we would have actually trusted God and obeyed what He said. Let's pray. God, I thank You for who You are. God, I thank You for calling us to courage because when You call us to be courageous, You call us to be something better. You call us to be something more. You promise to be with us. You promise to go alongside of us. You promise to lead us and come behind us. But God, you call us to more. I thank you for not being satisfied with just who I am today, because I know I'm broken, whether I want to admit it or not. God, I believe we're people who know that we're broken. We know that we have steps we need to take and growth we need to make and conversations we need to have. God, I pray that this morning you would help us to be men and women of courage. That we would address the fear and embrace the opportunity and take the step even though it scares the hell out of us. God, I pray that you'd move. I pray that you'd speak, and I pray that just like you did with Joshua, you would call us to great things and give us the opportunity to trust you. It's in your name I pray. Amen. So last thing we're going to do here before one song is we have people passing communion down the road. It's something we do here often at Element. And the reason we do it so often at Element is just a reminder that Jesus steps into our mess and gives us the ability to rise above it, to step out of it. And so there's 2 cups stacked on top of each other. One of them has a cracker. The other has some juice. It represents the body and blood of Christ that he shed on the cross so that we could have the hope of salvation. Some of you today need to take your step of courage and check a box and say, I want to accept Jesus as my Savior. So we can have a conversation this week and you can make that next step, because we're not done at 15 people here at Element. There's 158,346 people within 5 miles of here that we believe God's called us to reach. And you're one of them. We want you to experience truth and grace. And this morning could be the moment where you make a decision to take a step of courage, check a box, and experience Jesus. Go ahead and enjoy communion. The band's going to lead us in one final song.